Through a Scottish Prism, the programme that is unapologetically pro-Scottish independence and anti-Westminster rule. Everything we say here is viewed through a Scottish Prism. Brought to you by Barhead Boy.
Hi folks, welcome back to Through a Scottish Prism. Great to have you back. Been a week since we last had a wee chat. I hope you and yours are all well. Again, we've had a heck of a week, lots to talk about, and I've got lots of people to help me talk about it too. But before I do that, I keep forgetting, Techie tells me to do it. If you haven't already hit the subscribe button, please do, so you don't ever miss another show. And also, if you do like what you hear, hit the like button, because it moves us up the algorithms on YouTube and gets us higher up the playlist. And that would help us greatly. But to help me this week with all that's been going on, I am joined by some of our regulars. I'm joined by, of course, the Coatbridge Cavalier, who's now actually back in South Korea. Phil, welcome, my friend. How are you?
Splendid.
Excellent. We'll hear about your trip in a second back home. And I'm also joined by Yvonne Ridley from down there on the borders. Yvonne, how are you, my friend? Love the hat. Love the hat.
Yes, firing on all six cylinders today.
Good. Still got a wee bit of a cough, but you'll be fine.
Yes, a legacy from Coatbridge.
Yeah, he's well, isn't it? Don't go there. We've got we'll go to Coatbridge, is great, especially the Eagle Inn, and we'll talk about that in a second. And Eva Comrie from Kirkmanshire. Eva,
Hi,
hello, how are you, my friend?
Hi, well, we're obviously recording this on Saturday morning, but by the time it goes out, we will have been at the All Under One Banner March and rally in Edinburgh. So for now, I'm enthused and looking forward to a massive turnout and a strong, strong message, not only to Westminster, but to the Scottish Government in relation to the need for immediate action on independence. So everything to play for and raring to go.
And because we like you so much, folks, we're spoiling you today. We've brought an extra guest on, and it's a good old friend of the programme who it's been too long since he's been on, but we're delighted to welcome back the Grousebeater himself, Gareth. There from the capital city of Edinburgh. Gareth, my dear friend, how are you?
I'd be lying if I said I'm fighting fit, but I'm here. So please make the most of me.
Well, we certainly will, my friend. We're delighted to have you, and it's wonderful to see you looking in fine fettle. Well, just on the Coatbridge live show, which was fantastic, and thanks publicly now to Techie, who had horrendous problems, and it landed in the same weeks as he was having even more horrendous problems at work, and at one point had to do an all-nighter. So thanks to Techie, and thanks to all of you who came to Coatbridge, thanks to all who participated, and thank you for the wonderful comments that we've had from them. And yes, we will be going on the road. We're looking at a venue just now, or next, we hope, we don't know, we hope to do one at the conference. And we've had a few other requests, so if you want us to come do a show in your area, find a suitable venue, let us know, and we'll try and fit it in. So, folks, here we go. What a week. We've got a lot to cram in, and as usual, we're going to run out of time. Nothing surer. If I can start with you, Phil, the budget and the fallout from the budget is still going on. It is incredible what has happened. There's even talk that our new Prime Minister has managed a feat that none of us could have imagined, that she managed to wipe 500 billion off the values of the money markets in under 2 weeks. This has been an omni-shambles, is the best way of describing the budget.
I think we should be cautious about laying all the blame of the omni-shambles at the door of the new PM and this mini-budget, as horrific as it is. There's the issue of Brexit. There's the issue of the continuous financial capitalism and draining and usury of extracting monies for the corporations out of an economy that has reversed away from industrial capitalism. And I think most people can see it for what it is. The hedge funds are making money. Even the International Monetary Fund, who I'm not a big fan of, is slagging off the British government. Yeah, 500. It's just more trouble, as if things couldn't get any worse. It's very sad to see, but amongst all these headlines, what people really need to remember is it's the people at the bottom end that receive all the pain and all the suffering and all the increased and unnecessary increased costs. This country is being railroaded by the rentier class and by those who are extracting our money from our people and taking the food for the mouths of babes. It's disgusting. But it's not just this, it's just the tip of the iceberg, this budget. We're just heading into a never-ending spiral of destruction. It's horrific to see. Horrific.
The Treasury Minister, Philp, he went on and said, oh, this is all because of Mr. Putin and what's happening in the Ukraine. Just a lie, Philip.
Yeah, a complete lie. I know we're going to come on to that later on, but no. Again, it's anyone to blame. It's deflection, trying to blame others, and like I said, I don't put too much stock in this. This is, after all, a mini budget. I've spoken about Kwasi. He knows what he's doing. He majored in the history of politics. He knows the difference between industrial capitalism and financial capitalism, and he knows what the hedge funds are about, and he knows the impact that his policy is going to have. He's not a stupid man. He's just the tool of those who would keep us on our knees, and that has to change.
Yvonne, another unprecedented thing that happened, and they usually don't, certainly not to first world countries, the IMF and the Bank of England said to the government, you need to reverse this. I mean, for goodness sake, apparently the pension system was hours away from going bust, just like the banks had back in 2008. That was the effect of this so-called budget for growth. It's scary.
Well, bizarrely enough, when Liz Truss was going through her leadership contest, Rishi Sunak did say, if you go ahead with these sort of policies, you will, and he went on to predict everything that has happened. I mean, I'm not a big fan of Rishi Sunak, but he predicted this, and yet this less than 1% of the country still went ahead and voted for Liz Truss. What I will say for Liz Truss is she's probably done more to re-kickstart the independence cause more than Nicola Sturgeon. You know, we've got a British Prime Minister who has probably got more people talking about independence now in Scotland than ever before. So, you know, now is the time, and we'll see today. I'll be joining and everyone else in Edinburgh, and I hope it's a cracking turnout and a foretaste of what is to come in Glasgow next week.
Well, here's hoping. Eva, it's a lot of the public, the vast majority of the public think, well, this doesn't affect me. I don't sell pounds or buy dollars, and it doesn't affect me. But this is going to have a horrific effect already on people in Scotland who are suffering massive poverty, energy bills, the cost of living, inflation out of control. Down the line, and not too far away, it's not going to be like months away, we're talking weeks. This is really going to hurt the worst, the most vulnerable in our society.
Well, Roddy, I think the reality for many people in Scotland is already terribly stark, and I think that many are afraid of what's coming down the tracks. But the importance and the significance of what Liz Truss calls a mini budget is it wasn't really a mini budget. It was a very determined, albeit sloppy, attempt to impose the most right wing of policies at the absolute worst time in British political history, but certainly from a Scottish perspective. All you can call it is a reverse Robin Hood, where she is in effect robbing from the poor to give to the rich, and then coupling that with a criticism that the Scottish Government is not also tampering with tax rates to put money back into people's pockets, which is really pretty disingenuous in the circumstances. I mean, the energy issues is obviously one of the biggest difficulties facing Scots more than it is anybody else. The average bills in Scotland are going to be far higher than they are down south for obvious reasons. And it's also unnecessary. It's a theft from Scotland, as we know. You know, we send our resources south, we get less than half back of what we pay in. But in the context of gas, electricity, renewables, we're paying an absolute fortune to fire that into the national grid, and we're paying more to get it back out again. It's us. And it's something that the Scottish Government needs to do something about with all due haste. I would slightly take issue with Phil there when he referred to what's happening in this country, because from my perspective, this country is not the UK. This country is Scotland. And, you know, the UK is currently, as we know, a union of 4 nations, where 3 of them have been shafted repeatedly by the actions of 1. One of the big issues just now is the impact of Brexit, that Brexit for which the Scots did not vote. And we're being penalised on a daily basis because of its results and the fact that the English did vote for it. Hell mend those whose political ambitions were simply to paint stop Brexit on the side of a bus at a point in time when they should have been saying all hands to the pump, all shoulders to the wheel. How do we get Scotland out of this union the quickest and easiest way? And now, when we're facing what is almost Armageddon for some folk, they are still dragging their damn heels. I really sincerely hope that today in Edinburgh is a strong message to the Scottish Government, because it really is now or never in the context of getting the finger out and saving the people of Scotland who elected them to achieve independence as the first step on the road to recovery. Recovery from Brexit and recovery from the pandemic and recovery of hundreds of years of utter theft and disregard for the people of Scotland.
Well said, Eva. Gareth, it's, as I alluded to earlier, the IMF and the Bank of England are telling the Chancellor and the Prime Minister they need to reverse this. We know, we've lived long enough to know that politicians, particularly when it's just been made the Prime Minister and one that's been made the Chancellor, there's not a chance of them admitting they were wrong and overturning what they've already done. So there is nothing that's going to stop the carnage that's coming our way, is there?
Well, no, under Librium, Liz, the Tory party are just carrying on from where Boris left off. Got an 78, 79 majority, and so they're just going to push through policies that are regressive. They don't have a single idea for anything. No fresh policies. They're exactly the same as Trump. It's just they come in and they want to annul policies that people fought for years, just wipe them out, because they see those as restrictions on our freedoms. I know very little about the financial world. I take a view that whatever the Chancellor does, if it brings the greatest good for the majority of people, it has to be a good thing. But unfortunately, that's not the way the British state works. Incidentally, you mentioned Russia because the British government is having a jolly old time blaming everything on Russia. There's been about 5 miles of road where I live laid with small chips, and signs go up. Slow down to 20 miles an hour in case you skid. And I've wondered why it still hasn't been tarmacked. The final surface hasn't been put on it. And then I discovered that slightly, okay, I can hear you.
What is it with the Prism showing dogs? I don't know.
Whose dog is that?
It's mine, and I'm trying.
There you go.
I discovered that we get slightly over 60% of our bitumen from Russia. So we'll not be seeing these roads finally surfaced anytime soon.
And Edinburgh needs, the potholes in Edinburgh particularly are really bad.
Absolutely. The council was making, an all-out campaign to try and get rid of potholes. And I've been running an all-out campaign to get 2 disabled bays created outside the general practice I use, where I was hauled out by a warden the other day from the medical waiting room and told to shift my car out of the motorbike space. So I had, it's the first time I'd raised my voice for a long time, and I let him know that he needed to get a life. Anyway, I'm digressing. So there is an element of it is the Russian war, but that's being exaggerated like mad, because we know that we're now moving into an area where we're beginning to experience the downside of pulling out of Europe. And pulling out of Europe, of course, destabilizing the EU is all part of the United States plan for domination, domination of the world markets. That's really where I am. Otherwise, I agree with Eva. I used to know Eva when I thought she lived in Comrie. But she had to point out, no, Comrie was a real name. And by God, she's incredibly eloquent these days and puts me to shame. So yes, everything has been said so far. I agree with it.
She's not just eloquent these days, she's always been eloquent, our Eva. The one thing that's also come out of this, Phil, is that for the first time I can remember since maybe 2008, 2009, the Labour Party have a lead over our dear friends, the Tories. To us in this programme and to the people of Scotland, it really makes no difference. It's Tweedledum and Tweedledee. But the scale of the lead that the Labour Party have, of about 30 points on average on these polls, if there's an election tomorrow, I mean, the Tories are facing, be under 100 MPs if there was an election tomorrow, as Jon Snow would say.
Yeah, but they're pushing. Truss has got a huge policy bill that she's pushing through Parliament, reversing environmental steps that have been taken to protect the planet. So you can see exactly what they're up to. They will get through as many bills altering society, re-engineering society as they can before they get wiped out. If they do get wiped out, as we know, a lot can happen between now and the next general election.
Yeah. So, Phil, I don't think we'll see much difference. To me, Labour, Tory, Tory, Labour, it's really, it'll make no difference to Scotland. It will make, and they have said, and Sir Keir, leader of the Workers' Party, Ian Murray and Anas Sarwar all said the same. Under no circumstances will we have any deal or any truck with the SNP. And yet, our Nicola, for the last 2 elections, has been trying to court Anas Sarwar to support her. This is, whether it's Tory or Labour, it makes no difference to Scotland or our cause, does it?
Correct, and the only difference it would make would if we had a proper socialist Labour Party, something that we saw under Jeremy Corbyn. But what has been made very, very plain to all in these islands is that England doesn't want that, and the establishment will not countenance a socialist organisation anywhere near the leading the United Kingdom. So no, what we've got are the Red Tories and Sir Keir Starmer, leader of the Labour Party, who refused to allow their representatives, their MPs and MSPs, to stand with the trade unions. It's an absolute disgrace. So no, it's just we've become Americanised. This is exactly where the Americans went and where we are now. And you've got the SNP, as you say, still trying to kiss up to Labour. Labour still refusing take any consideration of what SNP want, and more importantly, refusing to unify with their natural allies, or who should be their natural allies, which is the unification of the independence movement. And the SNP leadership know exactly what they're doing here. They're serving themselves and not the people, and that is to their eternal shame, and that will come out.
The Labour revival, if you want, Yvonne, in England, they need England. They don't need Scotland. They're pushing this lie. Oh, you've got to vote in Scotland, or we won't get rid of the Tories. They're back to that old vote for us because we're not as bad as the Tories. There's really, I can't think of anything, as Phil's alluded to, when the leader of the Labour Party is telling his MPs you'll be sacked if you stand in a picket line with the strikers. It's it's definitely Orwell forecasted, and it's happening now. It's really quite disgusting that the workers and the poor have nobody now to look after them throughout the UK.
Well, you look at the platform in Liverpool, and it was like a scene from a National Front conference in the 70s. It was wall to wall with Union Jacks. Instead of handing out the Tribune and Socialist Worker Party and leaflets, they were handing out the words to the national anthem, and opened the conference singing the national anthem. And it was just so surreal. And of course, it's totally offensive to the working classes. They're not interested in the working classes. And in England, I don't think there is a party that actually represents the working class people there. It's absolutely shameful. And of course, the polls are giving one story this week. They'll give another story next week, a month later. I feel sorry for the English voters because they have no choice. It's either the Tories or Tory light, and that's it.
The opening of the conference, Yvonne, you reminded me, recalls Kubrick's film on General Patton. We have a close-up of his face, and the camera takes about 3 minutes to pull back, and he's standing in front of a giant stars and stripes flag, to show the dominance of American power. And we all thought, oh, what terrific symbolism. Isn't it terrible? And there's Starmer doing almost the same thing in front of a Union Jack, which stands for very similar things, except that the British state must be incredibly jealous that their imperial role has now been overtaken by America.
Yeah.
And these are the very people who criticise us in Scotland for waving the salt here. And there they were, it was like a scene from a dystopian film. It was awful.
Contrary to the narrative, Eva, that the media were trying to portray about everyone in Scotland was heartbroken about Her Majesty, and they were also royalists and loyalists. The other place was Liverpool. Liverpool football fans get into trouble for booing the national anthem at Wembley. They get into trouble for not showing the due reverence to Mrs. Windsor or to Charles Windsor.
There's a fair undercurrent of rebellion, Roddy. You're absolutely right.
Absolutely, but in Liverpool is more than anywhere. So this final insult by the Labour Party to come in and Brit it up and sing Rule Britannia and God Save the Queen, or King rather, just showed that the lack of self-awareness, Eva, that the audience in Liverpool, where they were being hosted, this wasn't playing well with them.
Well, I think there's a characteristic in politics that we see very starkly today in the Labour Party, but we also now see in the SNP, and it is that the leadership are detached from the grassroots. And we know that when that happened in Scotland, the people just deserted Labour and went to the SNP. And, I was an SNP councillor in the 1990s in Clackmannanshire. We were in the minority group, it was a Labour-run council, and we disagreed fundamentally, obviously, on the constitutional question, but in fact, there was a great deal of sympathy and agreement between the SNP group and the Labour group in relation to the big, important issues of the day in a more socialist and popular context. Those Labour councillors I knew then were, in the main, people who had been founders and supporters of CND. They had opposed the poll tax. Some had opposed the Falklands War. They'd certainly all supported the miners during the miners' strike, and they hated Thatcher, absolutely to the core. But I watched as those people and those around them became disillusioned with Labour, and now some of those folk are no longer with us, but those who still are must have been absolutely ballistic watching the pantomime of the money being spent on everything surrounding that, not just the Queen's funeral, but the various commemorations prior to the funeral, the I suppose repeated ceremonies in relation to the King. We've still got the coronation to come, and what you see is God Save the King, sung by the party who were supposed to be the saviour of the working people, who still think that folk harken back to the days of Keir Hardane and Iron Bevan, the NHS, and a whole load of other things that were all great innovations in their day. But the Labour Party of today, described by a Knight of the Realm as centrist, at a point in time when it's Swiss banks for him and the likes of him, and food banks for everybody else. God help the Labour Party when the good people of England actually do rebel, because that's what they'll do. If they vote Labour, which I don't doubt that they will in some places, they are not going to see delivered the Labour solutions that they expect. What they'll see is a repeat of Tony Blair, but worse. So it's terribly sad, but it gives an escape route for Scotland if we can only achieve our independence and make Scotland a leftist, social democrat-ish kind of country. Yes, there'll be room for the conservative kind of policies that sometimes Phil and his friends favour to a point, but I think that an independent Scotland will be a far more egalitarian world than the United Kingdom can ever hope to be, whether it's under a red Tory or a blue Tory.
I agree. Gareth, you touched on earlier about the massive majority the Tories have at Westminster. And a few weeks ago, we had a discussion on here when it was in the middle of the Tory leadership contest. And I opined, and I think in agreement with my friends here, we all thought, no, there'll be no general election quickly. The Tories have got this majority, they can push through the policies, again, which you've alluded to. But I think this confirms now, when they're now 30 points behind the Labour Party, I think we can all safely say there's not going to be a general election before late 2024, when is the final time they can go. I don't see it under any circumstances going before then, do you?
Well, they may have to change leaders again in the interim. Truss is incompetent. We knew that before she arrived. The arrogance that issues from having a huge majority, similarly echoed by Nicola Sturgeon when she says so-and-so, group of people, their views are to be dismissed because she's not interested in anything except an unhealthy obsession in people's sex lives. There are lots of similarities between the two, so you can understand why we're starting to see comments on social media saying that the SNP is turning into a kind of Tory light party. It's not 100% true, but their attitude certainly is. So I've not quite answered your question properly. I just get repulsed by what I hear spoken from Westminster, and I look at Ian Blackford, and I really feel sorry for him. He gets a hell of a lot of stick for standing there, and repeating the same warnings to the British government, that warnings that actually have no reality behind them. I just feel sorry for him because we're outnumbered, and the Scottish public have not been told by the SNP why being subservient to an alien parliament puts our nation at a loss. We may as well be North England. In fact, that's what they're trying to do. I mean, you had, what's his name, nipping up to Orkney the other day to hold meetings up there. Tory minister going to Orkney, almost unheard of. Suddenly find an Orkney on the map. He got a lot of boos and protests when he arrived in Stromness. But, it's the colonial at work. And we have here an SNP with a majority, and they still are unable to stop a hub of the British state being created in the middle of the capital city of Edinburgh. It's tragic. And as I say, I just listen to them and you end up just shaking your head. But the thing is not to feel inadequate, not to feel there's nothing we can do. We have to keep fighting, we have to keep protesting.
Indeed we do. It's encouraging to know that in a bastion of unionism like Stromness, that they were booing a British Tory. That's encouraging. But Phil, Gareth being the kind, decent gentleman he is, feels some pity for Mr. Blackford down at Westminster. I have none whatsoever, none, not a bit of pity for him. I got nothing. I've got to be quite honest and say but contempt.
His job's a poisoned chalice.
Well, it is, but they shouldn't be there, Gareth, is my opinion.
Well, Alex Salmond feels they should.
Well, we'll see about that after the conference. That's another story for another day. Our Yvonne's got a fantastic motion going into conference, which might just change that. But I've noticed the MPs, Phil, all the SNP MPs, we need to recall Westminster to have a chat about this. But I go with what Eva promoted, and I've been pushing myself, which is, no, don't bother going to Westminster. Let's have, as you promised, Nicola Sturgeon, on the 31st of January 2020, let's have a Scottish Constitutional Convention, recall the MPs, call in the MSPs, call in every councillor from every party and say, let's start negotiating our cessation from this broken and accursed union. So I have no pity. I have anger that they're going down there to take that abuse, because when they abuse Ian Blackford or any one of the other ones, they're abusing me and every other Scot in the world. There should be no pity for them.
Well, it's racist. It's just colonial. We're listening to colonial racism.
Yeah.
Yeah,
so
and it's incessant. I see it, obviously, you're kind of between a rock and a hard place. One, you're elected to represent, and that's your job. The party is telling you to do this. So you've got the loyalty to the party. Your constituents, some of whom want you there. But I agree with what you're saying, Roddy, and what we've all talked about, that we believe in abstentionism. We think that that's the way to go. But this is a democracy, supposed to be, or we're trying to make it one anyway. And at the moment, the SNP's position is that they send their MPs down there. I think it's a waste of time. I agree with Gareth as well. It is a poisoned chalice. He stands up there. But there's a balance here. I mean, how much is it liking the sound of your own voice, and how much of it is the feeding the id? There's two sides to this, there are two sides to this. But one thing's for sure, it's not effective. We're no further forward.
Well, he's certainly not losing weight. I find that
listen, he's got a great lifestyle. He travels, he did a lot of travel. It's not a very healthy existence, I have to say. It's there's a lot of travel involved, and I know where Ian lives, he's got a hell of a journey every time he's up down, and he's a very likeable fellow and a very capable and intelligent man. But I'm with Roddy and the rest of us that I believe abstentionism is the way forward, and I don't see it's having any effect whatsoever on the betterment of the people of Scotland.
Well, we had Nicola just 2 days ago crowing that the SNP looked likely, according to the latest polls, to be the new opposition in London.
No, it's not. Numerically, it's not possible. The numbers would be 98 for the Tories at worst, but no, they wouldn't be the opposition. But Yvonne, if I could say to you, let you plug your motion here a wee bit, but since 1934, when the SNP formed, till today, and Phil can correct me if I'm wrong, there has been 2 minor victories at Westminster. One of them was an amendment to a fox hunting bill, which I believe Phil took part in. An amendment. Am I right, Phil? It was an amendment. And the other one is the claim of right, which was put through unopposed. Now, in 87 years, that's all the MPs from the Scottish independence parties or any other party from Scotland have achieved, because there is nothing. You can't, when you've got 59, even when it was 72 Scottish MPs, you cannot beat the numerically superior amount of English MPs. So it is pointless. We're going to make no victory. I don't understand what people think we're achieving down there that's advancing our cause. And I know you agree.
Well, absolutely. The definition of insanity is doing the same thing time and time again. And I am surprised at Gareth showing sympathy towards Ian Blackford and Phil. A few kind words there for Ian Blackford, who is, can I remind you guys, sympathy is that word in the dictionary between shit and syphilis. They go down there. They're the ones who could really stir things up. Instead, it rested on the shoulders of 2 Alipur MPs, Neil Hanby and Kenny McCaskill, to really stir up that place. That's what we want to see. Shut up, Bertie. That's what we want to see in Westminster. Not Ian Blackford standing up saying the people of Scotland will not tolerate this. How many times PMQ every week, the people of Scotland, and he's derided and ridiculed. What he should do is say, everybody up, everybody out. We're not putting ourselves through this racism and abuse. And if this is what democracy is in Westminster, we want none of it. Let's go back to Edinburgh and work out the road to independence. That's what we want to hear from Ian Blackford.
I agree. Could you just disagree in any shape, way or form, Eva?
I would take a slightly different approach at the moment, and I would say that history tells us that the most memorable politicians are those who say or do things that change the world. And where we are at the moment is the SNP in Westminster actually have the ability to etch their names in history for all eternity. But it's a frightening prospect for them because they are human. And there's a little to be said for them remembering their mandate and then understanding that some people want them to be in Westminster and others think that they should leave. But politicians are supposed to learn how to gamble. They are not robots. And everybody in this broadcast, and probably everybody watching it, will have had times in their life when they've been absolutely terrified at what tomorrow might hold. And we talk about being courageous, we talk about being brave, but being brave is not the absence of fear. Being brave and taking courage into both hands is looking at the fear, staring it in the face and saying, by God, I am going to do this because the outcome is worth it. So we should be looking at where we are, where we might be and where we want to be, and look at the actual, the possible, the potential, and say, all of us collectively, to the SNP and to Neil and Kenny, Remember Parnell, listen to Alex Salmond's words, use the Westminster process to publicise the independence plan and his principle and the precious nature of self-determination. Every single day when Westminster sits, an SNP member or Kenny or Neil could take a turn in standing up and saying, we ain't going to take this no more, enough is enough. You know, I'm quoting Kenny from the other night in Tranent, fabulous declaration of Tranent, enough is enough, we ain't taking it anymore. And, you know, a mass walkout as often as possible by the SNP and Neil and Kenny will hit the headlines in the news worldwide, and it will help to achieve the second strand of what we need for independence, international publicity and also international support. And that leaves us then with Nicola being supported by the entire independence movement to proceed with all due haste with the Constitutional Convention and take the people with her. But they need to be brave, they need to be courageous, and they have to say, Scotland's future is why we are here, and let us use every tool at our disposal to achieve the future that Scotland deserves. So abstentionism, yes, it has its time, but for now, what the SNP have to do is to be strong, be courageous, be brave. No more of this yellow belly cowardice standing up and saying Scotland won't be dragged out, Scotland won't have this, the people of Scotland will have their say. It's embarrassing. It's sad. So I'm going to give some of my courage and my support to Ian Blackford when I say to him, when you go back to Westminster, Ian, make sure that you're there long enough to stage another walkout and do it every day until kingdom come, because that's what Scotland deserves.
Absolutely.
Regarding Blackford, one has to say that whatever you hear him say is a lot more than you've ever heard coming out of Holyrood. And I think the public, even when they just get snatches of his speeches in the House of Commons, are more aware of the point of view he's putting across on our behalf than anything at a Holyrood. You get the occasional piece of anger from Sturgeon, but I can't, it's very difficult to think of anyone else, any MSP that you could point to and say, oh, that was a wonderful speech on behalf of, you know, I don't know, the Highlands and Islands, or on behalf of the poverty in Glasgow, you know, and pointing out where the traces of it arise from the money that the British Treasury hold back and do not return to Scotland. So my disappointment lies with Holyrood. But it was conceived, wasn't it, to be a talking shop like a local council. You still get smug remarks from Tories that it's nothing more than a local, you know, Stonybridge local council.
But I think, Gareth, two things on that. One, I think if anyone did make an exceptionally good speech and showed a bit of talent, they would quickly be getting a visit from our corrupt Polish to get lifted for daring to take the light away from Nicola Sturgeon. It's up to her. She could do it every day, but she's promoting Nicola Sturgeon. She's not actually, you know, pushing and encouraging her MSPs to do anything. And the other point is that the media tend to cover the big parliament and don't give the coverage to Holyrood it deserves. But I want to go out of sequence, if I may, and go back to you, Eva, because this week as well, it came up, was the submission to the Supreme Court, where the SNP have come in, who even they, with their own Lord Advocate, they weren't happy with the submission that the Lord Advocate, who Nicola Sturgeon chose, had put in, and they wanted to do a verbal addendum to it. Two things. One, that's scary that they had to do that. And what did you make of their new submission?
I'll give you a cynical perspective, first of all.
Oh, please do. We love cynicism here.
The cynic says that the First Minister knew what she was doing when she appointed a Lord Advocate who has recovered before, is not known to be a fan of independence. And so it was likely to be in the First Minister's mind that an application of this nature might have to be made, because it was unlikely that this particular Lord Advocate would certify that Holyrood in fact has the legal ability to pass a referendum in relation to independence. So this was in contemplation. I think, though, that the First Minister has had to encourage the Lord Advocate to take this step, partly as the result of the pressure coming from elsewhere within the Yes movement, especially from Alex Salmond and the various different methods that he has repeatedly outlined about how we move towards independence. It's the feet to the fire argument to make that begin to happen. Because, cynically again, we know the referendum bill first showed its face in March 2021, so we've never had an explanation as to why it took from then until just a few weeks ago for it to be seen again. The only explanation is that the First Minister knew that the game was a bogey and she had to be seen to be moving. So that kind of covers the Lord Advocate's application. But I think the reason why this SNP had to try to become officially an intervener in the Supreme Court process is because they very rapidly realised that the people of Scotland, again, led to this conclusion by Alex Salmond and Kenny McCaskey and Neil Hanvey especially, understood that the prospect of the Lord Advocate's application succeeding was almost nil. And so I think that the SNP have lodged their application in an effort to show further down the line to their critics and to the people of Scotland who elected them, when the application fails, that they actually did their best to make it work. Because look what they did. They not only had the Lord Advocate as the government's lawyer pursuing the case, the SNP very magnanimously spent their own money on their own lawyer to support that argument. But where they've shot themselves in the foot, though, and again, they've probably blown both feet off, is that when you read the SNP written submission, which is all the Supreme Court has allowed them to do, lodge it in writing, they narrate, in effect, the claim of right from a few hundred years ago until the modern day, and they actually have the great good grace to quote the words of Alex Salmond, which are in Hansard from 1997, when he put a very illuminating question to the then Secretary of State Donald Dewar in respect of the sovereignty of the people of Scotland. Unfortunately for the SNP and for their lawyers who drafted the application, they name Donald Dewar and they attribute his direct quote to him. They do not similarly name Alex Salmond, although they quote him word for word. So I'm quite happy to name Alex Salmond today and every day, because out of the entire application made on behalf of the SNP, the best, most accurate, most telling and most significant couple of sentences are those from Alex Salmond. So the SNP have shown us that they actually understand the power and the ability of the man who needed only one mandate, and they would do well to listen to his advice now as to how we go forward when the Supreme Court refuses the application.
Indeed, one mandate and only 6 MPs, Eva, not 48, and Alec got us through. Phil, to put you on the spot, we're a year away and a few days from the referendum on independence that we're alluding to in the Supreme Court. We are a week away from the SNP conference, and I looked at the agenda, and I have to say there's no motions on independence, there is none on currency, there is none on the central bank, there is none in rejoining the European Union. In fact, there is nothing on the referendum, there is nothing appertaining to the referendum, and we're only a year away. Now, I might be back to the cynicism, I might be an old cynic, but that seems kind of suspicious to me, Phil.
Yes, it's more than suspicious. What it does, it evidences the fact that SNP are not serious about independence. Where's the plan? Where's the strategy? Why are we not? I mean, it's like the question we were talking about there, Eva articulated so well, was this Supreme Court action, is it a step in the right direction? Well, no. It's not a step in the right direction, unless it's part of a real and workable strategy to take our independence. Anything else or anything less than that is tokenism. And Eva's nailed it why that's the case. Alex Salmond, under him, yes, we would be heading in the right direction, but we see no evidence of the SNP taking us anywhere closer to independence, because what is the cunning plan? What is the strategy? I mean, you combine all of this together. You know, the move by they talked about the SNP conference coming up, and you tie that in with the move by Glasgow City Council to cancel the festival and force a Hobson's choice on the organisation to either have it on the day of an all-under one banner march or at the time of the SNP conference. Why? Because I know firsthand from elected SNP members that they're not permitted to attend the festival, and now they've got the perfect excuse thanks to Susan Aiken, the leader of Glasgow Council. So what is this strategy about? This strategy is empowering the SNP and disabling the unification, all attempts to unify or Alba or anyone else to unify the indie movement or create a strategy that might actually get us independence. It's terrible to see, but I think the only good thing out of this is more and more people are seeing Nicola and this current leadership of the SNP for what they are. They are not independentistas. They're certainly not acting like independentistas.
Yvonne, we've got this all under one banner march in Edinburgh, outside, near Nicola Sturgeon's back door, front door, whatever you like. If ever was an opportunity for the de facto leader of the independence movement to say, here we go, I'm going to go to the front of this march, and when we get to the meadows, I'm going to tell you how it is and what's going to happen, and they give you my famous plans coming out of my handbag today. So I want all the independentistas to muster in Edinburgh and join me while we send a message to the world. That's not an unreasonable opinion if you were a leader of an independence movement, is it? You're muted.
You would expect her to be either leading the rally or walking with all of us in the rally. You'd expect some sort of support. But what really disappoints me, one of her very well-known supporters said last week that people must get behind the SNP and really push if they want independence. And I thought, where the hell have you been this summer? Alipa has distributed more than 100,000 copies of its We Blue book about independence. The I parties, the Yes parties, the SSRG and their magnificent weekend that they held, the Salvo people, they have been working their puddings off right throughout the summer to push the message for independence. The big absence in the landscape has been the SNP and the leadership of the SNP. So it's as though that we can't possibly have independence without the SNP. But the trouble is, the SNP are not the party of independence anymore. It's time we realised that, and it's time that we moved on and got behind all the movements, the groups, the think tanks, the people initiatives and the other political parties that are independent-minded and focus on that. The gesture politics that we're getting at the moment, this farcical cap in hand to an English court for permission, it's rubbish. We will get independence in Scotland, but we'll do it through people power. We certainly won't do it through the SNP. Hell will freeze over first before that happens, and people are beginning to wake up to that. But even in government, I don't know if you're going to talk about it, but this Scotland Ferries scandal. is really growing now, and it looks as though the SNP is up to its eyes in some sort of corporate fraud and political corruption. Either that or sheer incompetence.
Yeah.
So it's not even the party of to look to govern anymore. There are dark things happening inside the SNP, and we need transparency now more than ever to really focus on independence, and we're not going to get it from the SNP or Sturgeon.
I agree with you. Gareth, you remember back to 2013 being a year out from the referendum. You can remember what was going on and the buzz in the streets, the Yes movement, the SNP, everyone was pushing in one direction. Here we are now, apart from the people that we've been mentioning, the SNP have done nothing to promote their policy, their referendum. They're the government of the day. They're doing nothing.
Well, under Salmond, when he was First Minister, he was showing what could be done in an independent Scotland by his actions. Closing down tolls on our bridges, for example, building a new bridge across the Forth, pushing and approving a railway line in the borders. Was a whole panoply of actions that were proof positive how a nation can actually progress when it makes its own decisions with its own money. And he did it on a string budget. We know that tomorrow an official from the Scottish Government could have an audience with Charles. By the way, I find it difficult calling him King Charles, but go and see Charles, because that's the royal prerogative. He has we have to give him the courtesy, and tell him there and then that as the leading party in Scotland, leading National Party, we are withdrawing from the Union. However, we have formulated a new accord which we wish to negotiate. Now, as you know, the monarch is not allowed to interfere in politics. He can only endorse that. And then you come back and you refuse to cooperate with the departments of the British state, of Westminster. You just stop there and then. There would be retribution. There'd be threats of holding back the Barnett formula, which they're partly doing now anyway, by sending money direct to Tory councils. Yeah, there would be recrimination and there would be retribution. But the mechanisms are there for us now, which were never there when we didn't have a parliament. By holding the parliament back and providing a full democracy with only unionist parties, we were never able to turn on the British government and say, sorry, we're just not accepting this. They are moving really fast in colonising Scotland. They really are. I mean, you just look at all the houses that are being built everywhere, and you have to ask, where are the Scots that need these houses? Well, they're being built for incomers. Numbers are increasing. So, I don't see a problem with what we can do. I see a problem, as my colleagues here have pointed out, with the Scottish National Party, that it wants to be the Scottish nice party. You have to take risks. You have to go out there and say, as McCaskill did, enough is enough.
It's a worry. I wrote a blog which just came out today, Phil, and I know you're very interested in this topic. And it was a concern I've got, a worry. A lot of us have been saying that we need to go, we'll probably have to go to the UN, to the decolonisation unit, and say we're being treated as a colony.
Absolutely.
Well, it's a worry for me, because what's happening in the Donbass is there was a referendums there this week, where numbers like 97 and 96%, the lowest turnout was 87% in Kherson, which is under constant shelling, incidentally. And they invoked the UN Charter as was used in Kosovo in 2010, and saying, even though, yes, under Article 100 there are armed troops in the place, but as the precedent was set in Kosovo, and the West recognised it, but apparently the UN won't recognise it. They seem to be bending to the will of the Western narrative. I'm concerned, and you look at Chagos Islands, and you look what's happening in Palestine, and the UN not actually pushing sanctions or expulsions there of the State of Israel for what they're doing. I'm concerned that the decolonisation unit could work against us, because it might not be in the US's interest, never mind the UK's interest, that Scotland becomes independent and a non-NATO member.
Yeah, you're talking about the Donbass referendums are significant. Does it mark the end of this US hegemony or this dominance in a unipolar world, which it has been since the demise of the Soviet Union? It might not work in our favour because of their influence and their leverage, but as we see that unipolarity breach and we get competition, a rise of an alternative power or force, then I think the UN will have to take cognizance of that, and the US will be less influential. I mean, the Donbass referendums, look at East Ukraine. The histories, if you read the history, it's fascinating. East of Ukraine's mostly Donbass, it's Russian, but 92% Russian native speakers. Southern Ukraine, Odessa, Mykolaiv, Kherson, it's around 85% native Russian speakers. Even East Central Ukraine, which is east of the Dnieper split, which splits Kiev in two, that is majority. It's about 65% Russian in Russian speaking. So don't be duped into thinking this is an us and them thing. It's not two countries at war. This is a civil war in Ukraine, incited by the US and using, I wouldn't say the word, but NAZIs as they call it, like C-14 led by Yvonne. So as this has changed and is indicative of a change in what we're now approaching a multipolar world with the rise of China and the BRICS economies and all the alliance. So the multipolar world, such as before World War II and the bipolar one thereafter, up to the collapse of the Soviet Union, means US foreign policy has had its way. It's been aggressive and it was controlling, but it was based on realpolitik. They were very aggressive. But it had to be more realistic as there was competition to deal with. And other countries then, as we will have in the future, have a choice of whose gang you can be in. But since the collapse of the Soviet Union, we've got a unipolar world with an immensely powerful and largely unchallenged America, calling the shots as it wants and as a liberal hegemony, or a neoliberal state, you could call it. It naturally starts to influence and sculpt the world in its own image. And what is that image? Well, it would be a deindustrialised USA that makes its money via financial capitalism or usury, actions of the rentier class who create nothing but they don't create anything, they just extract wealth through sheer bonds and rents. Now, I'm not saying all of that is bad, but the extent of it and the lack of industrial capitalism in the UK and USA and the West that's causing the damage of corporate greed. Now, there's a guy, John Mearsheimer, who speaks very well on this, and the significance on us as an independent Scotland is the UN and what we're looking to get through our independence and going to these organisations, these institutions. I think we have to hope that with the rise of an alternative, the Americans don't want to lose their launching pad for nukes, which is Scotland. So they don't want to see a breakup of the UK. But this liberal hegemony, it wants to impose liberal democracy around the globe, and how you impose democracy is obviously a contradiction in terms. But things are changing, and with the BRICS rising and Iran, Venezuela, Pakistan, and now Saudi talk to these new rising powers, I'm not as fearful as I would have been when America called all the shots. I think we do have a shot at this because the world is changing, and Scotland has to change with it. We have to move to the future.
Well, I've got to just say we're coming towards the end here, so quick, folks. But Yvonne, I'm an old peacenik. I don't want to see us in anyone's gang, as Phil alludes to. I want us to be a neutral country like our friends in Ireland, with armed services which are defensive, not offensive. And I would like us just to be a nice, neutral country and nobody's gang. Is that a bad thing?
No, it's not, and it's also very possible. You know, when you look at one of the most influential countries in the world today, it's Qatar, and it's a tiny little piece of land that's, you know, hanging out of the gut of Saudi, and yet it punches well above its weight. It is involved in all sorts of diplomacy, international diplomacy, and power broking and peace broking, and this is the sort of role that I see that Scotland could have, because Scotland has no enemies, but it has a global brand, and you know there are so many Scots that are living around the world, and I think that Scotland could be a real force for good. And I think that on the international stage, because it isn't bogged down with this colonialism or imperialism that England has, I think Scotland could actually make quite an impact globally. We just need that confidence. We just need to get out there, get that independence, cut free from Westminster and start going, you know, start pushing forward the fact that, you know, peace is actually a good idea.
Absolutely. Absolutely. How about you, Eva? Are you positive about the future for Scotland?
Never more so, actually, Roddy, even although the current climate seems very bleak. It's the darkest days are just before dawn, I suppose. What I would say, though, is that we've seen what's happened in Catalonia. We know that the results of the referenda in these parts of Ukraine about Russia are going to be hotly contested, and there are ongoing attempts to discredit them. We do not want Scotland to fall into that trap. So all the more reason to ensure that when we do go to the international community demanding that our independence be recognised, we do so with as much power and force and organisation and management as we can possibly muster. So what that means is we have to continue to contend and to fight and to struggle on numerous fronts, but we have to do that in a properly managed fashion. So that's why I would say that we need to have an electoral event such as a referendum or a plebiscite. That's one strand. Another strand is the political power, where the politicians together have something like the Constitutional Convention, which clearly has support right across the entire Yes movement. And again, I make no bones about it. I will repeat this until it happens. The First Minister has no justification for failing to deliver that promise that she made almost 3 years ago. The people of Scotland who elected her so to do deserve nothing less. She's only doing her job when, not if, when she convenes that, because she and I know that she's going to do it. She's just hanging back to make it another grandiose announcement. In addition to the Constitutional Convention, what we want to see is international support now on an ongoing, consistent, never-ending basis. A thorough approach, such as the approach that the Irish have taken to mobilising the power and the impact of their diaspora. The Scottish diaspora is as big, if not bigger, than the Irish one. We've just not harnessed it for the good of Scotland so far. We have at times allowed it to be harnessed for the good of the oppressors within the UK. Well, it's high time that those Scots internationally put their money where their mouth is, quite literally, and decided, you know, how proud are they to be Scottish or to claim Scottish heritage? How much do they want to see their country, Scotland, thrive and be the country it's supposed to be, not the country that has suffered for centuries from depopulation, deliberate or otherwise, negligent, willful or otherwise, from clearances, from industrial mismanagement, from what we've got at the moment in the context of poverty, theft of energy, no oil fund, no wind fund. We don't even yet have a direct access by a ferry from Scotland to Europe. We've got to export our goods through England. It's utterly ridiculous.
Yeah.
I would say politicians, the international community, international Scots at home, and those elected to get our independence, get the finger out, have a managed, concerted campaign and get it underway properly now with real determination. No more lip service, no more hand-wringing. Get wired in. Now is the day, now is the hour.
Hear, hear. Gareth, my friend, you get the last word, which is only right. There's the doyen of us all. Are you optimistic for Scotland?
One has to be. Our situation, our predicament, falls into all the categories of the United Nations criteria of what constitutes a colonised country. So I have no anxiety about going to them and asking them to endorse that. I'm not asking for UN soldiers to be sent into Scotland to protect us, but just to endorse it, as they did the Chagos Islanders case. And of course, we know that England has ignored the United Nations decree.
That's my worry. That is my worry.
Well, but we know England will do that. That's what England does. We've had hundreds of years of history to know exactly what their outlook is and what their actions will be. And they haven't paid the reparations to the Chagos Islanders either. So, yeah, our negotiations will be prolonged. But here's the thing. When the Romans were here, they didn't build Hadrian's Wall to protect their English territories. They built Hadrian's Wall to keep the Picts and the Scots out because they understood very quickly we were ungovernable. And there's been successive English parliaments that have said the same thing. When Cromwell handed Scotland over to the English Parliament, they refused Scotland. They said, no, we don't want to govern that place. And then, of course, the Romans under Antoninus thought, no, we can tame, we can civilize those Scots. So they built the Antonine Wall. And again, they got beaten back by the hit and run groups of Picts and Scots and probably 10 trillion midges. But, the Romans understood, because they were really intelligent, that the Scots had different language from those folk in England. Their houses were different. They were made of stone, called brochs, whereas the English was still using mud and wattle. And they understood that we had different religions, different values, and we were self-sustaining. The Romans showed us that Scotland was a self-supporting, autonomous country, and it could not and would not be subservient to an alien power. So we're still there, and the English don't seem to learn anything from history. So I am optimistic, so long as we are belligerent, so long as we are the ones who are organizing the narrative, and we are the ones who are asking for the right to be free, for liberty, and we can be really nice neighbours when we get it.
Because the other thing you forgot to say, that the Romans knew, and you should all know down south, were also full of nutters. And if you mess about with us, the nutterness will come out. Now, my final thing, at the end of the show, I want to thank all my guests. I want to thank you all for watching. I have a little bit of history for you, and it appertains to just post-Culloden. And it's one of the reasons why we're subdued, And one of the reasons why we're angry and we want out, this is what happened back then, and I hope it acts as an inspiration to you all. Please listen to it, enjoy it, and until we see you again, to you and yours, please take care.
Glorious fireworks. We're encamped near the ruins of Fort Augustus, our tents among the cattle of 1,000 hills, for our parties hourly bring in large droves. Every tent has its goat or two. Our fellows grow so fat they'll seem like strangers to a campaign soon. We're amongst the hills. Some are 7 miles high. Yet daily we erect pyramids higher than those, made of smoke. 30 houses are now burning in my view, glorious fireworks. Major Lockhart's back from Glenmoriston, where he killed 17, hanged some by their heels, burnt 400 houses and drove back 1,400 cattle. Lord Sackville does the same in Glenshiel. Glengarry broke his word to turn in his men, so his house and land are now blazing. We have 11 regiments of foot and Kingston's horse. The rest are dispersed through this heathenish country, converting them to Christianity and propagating a new light amongst them. Some of them bring in their arms, others skulk in the mountains. We take care to leave nothing they can eat unless they can browse like their goats. Thomas Ash Lee, Captain, Wolfe's 8th Regiment of Foot.
And it was the home of Oliver Cromwell, who defeated the Scots at Dunbar, incorporated Scotland into his protectorate, and transported the Scots as slaves to the colonies. Now, there's an answer to the West Lothian question.